Guys, we're so excited to be here today. This is the first time we've been here at ReFashion Week, so thank you for having us. I have my laptop because I'm being responsible and not printing my notes. So, how are you? You all good? We're going to here to talk about rewriting the fashion code, Y2K20. I'm super excited to have this amazing group of, if you on face value, you would say they're designers. These guys are, I call them technologists. I think it was really interesting in that first panel session that we had, and the panelists were referring to, the fact that a lot of the waste and a lot of the issues that we have with sustainability, et cetera, aren't actually in the end result. It's actually in the creation of garments. So I wanted to pull together these guys today. I'm going to introduce them to you. This is Joshua and Lara from Chimera. They are, everyone here is young, as you can see. Recent graduates, Parsons and MIT. And their focus is on machine learning and artificial intelligence in the fashion space. So we're going to talk about that. We have Josefina Muñoz here. Josefina is also from Parsons, right? And Josefina, I think the interesting about Josefina is her upcycling, but with a social bent, right? So like looking at how we can pull together, she'll tell you her story about how she was at Gucci recently and got their Gucci umbrella bags and made them into an outfit. But looking at how we take disused merchandise and then actually create new societal norms really through them, right? So like, you think about there's a collab, Louis Vuitton and Supreme, right? I know you all know about that. Well, that was an agreed upon collab, but what about the collab with Louis Vuitton, Supreme, and anybody else who's like, discarded pieces you found and put together? That's called a what do we call it? A forced collaboration by the consumer, right? So, we're going to talk about that. Josefina also uses chicken bones. She's wearing a set of chicken bone earrings, which are actually really cool. Lara, I mentioned you, Jeron Braxton, and all these guys here are VFILES family. I'm super proud of everything they do. Jeron is a designer, a technologist, and uses his voice and his platform to really talk about things that we could perhaps do better. Investigating 3D printing, investigating different ways of storytelling through fashion, through merchandise, through technology. Jeron recently worked with us on our VFILES runway show at Barclays Center. And when Jeron moved into the office with a Lenovo, right, I immediately knew I had to take him seriously. In fact, how many did we have going? I don't know. We had so many computers rendering at once with Jeron's work. And Colm is Kid Super. Colm is a incredible talent in terms of design, in terms of community, in terms of looking at everything differently and not being scared to do that. And the interesting thing about Colm as well is he's also a mathematician, right? So what you have up here is not just what, everyone sees as I'm going to be a fashion designer. What you have up here are, I refer to them as creative academics and the future of fashion. So I wanted just to go through first and have each person talk about themselves. I'm going to start with Colm. Just tell to a little bit about what they do and how they do it, and how it is different. How you approach your process that is definitely non-traditional.
Okay, didn't know I was going to be the first person, so everyone follow this rubric that I'm about to set. Yeah, I guess what's interesting, I think the perspective that I come from is there never seemed like a clear way to enter the fashion world for me. I didn't go to fashion school. I grew up in New York City, so I was surrounded by fashion, and it was just, at a young age, I wanted to make something that was tangible, that people could kind of support me without needing a ton of money. So when I was 14, I was selling T-shirts out of my cafeteria. And that's how this whole thing kind of grew, and from there it became hats, and then sweaters, and then et cetera, and then that turned into music videos and turned into films, and then I ended up rebranding companies and stuff like that. But it was always this kind of goal to create and what was tangible. And as she was saying, when I was in college, I was a math major, and I got a math degree, and everyone is kind of shocked, how could you be a math degree and have a clothing brand? But my view on creativity is kind of problem solving. So I always looked at these math equations as, how can you be the most creative to come up with the best solution? So I applied that mentality into anything, and that's kind of the Kid Super spirit. And as she said, community is huge with the Kid Super brand, and I don't know how many of you saw, but 6 months ago for New York Fashion Week, we did this recycling fashion show where everyone donated clothes, and I had Singer donate 50 sewing machines, and people came and worked for a month before making these upcycled looks, and then we had this whole fashion show, and we actually beat a world record. We had the longest trench coat ever, which I called Guinness World Records, and it's a complete sham. They asked for $12,000 for the record, and I was like, I thought I won it. But yeah, so if you leave anything here, you know that Guinness World Records is a sham. But yeah, I guess I don't know what else I'm supposed to talk about myself, but yeah, I think that idea of approaching everything like a math problem and trying to figure out is where my perspective comes from.
Thanks, Colm. I love it. All right, Jeron.
Yeah, it's your boy, Jeron Braxton, young iOS Braxton, young Picante Poppy. What's poppin'? I am probably one of the best, if not the best, animator in the world right now.
Woo! Love it.
That's the digital space is my space, and I'm really into sustainability and try to keep things as digital as possible. And yeah, but with fashion, it's kind of tricky. It's kind of tricky. So I'm kind of interested in this panel and what we're gonna talk about today. But I usually keep things in the digital world and do video games, animation, and 3D printing. 3D printing is really cool, and I've been really into experimenting with different things you can 3D print with, because we've just scratched the surface of that. So yeah, thank you for having me on this panel.
Always, Jeron. All right, Lara, I got some questions for you, Jeron. I stayed up late working on my questions.
Hi, my name is Lara Tang. I did go to fashion school, but when I was in school, I didn't like sketching. I didn't like sketching dresses, but what I really did like was the machinery and like putting together clothing. So I would be like that person like underneath the sewing machines, like under all the different equipment for production. But I also have a background in computational 3D design. So like when I was thinking about like how do we have things that put together our fashion systems, and why are we relying on things that are hundreds of years old and like systems of production that are hundreds of years old. And so we think about the future of fashion, it really lies with the stuff that we have yet to make, all of those systems that we have yet to make. And so that's why Joshua and we founded a company called Chimera, which uses artificial intelligence to design clothing. And
Lara, you should tell everyone what you do for your day job as well.
Oh, at my day job, I work at an aerospace engineering software company. So we're like deep into advanced manufacturing, like metal 3D printing and that kind of thing. But again, as I said, I like machinery, so. Thanks.
So these guys are technically rocket scientists as well. Josefina?
Hi, my name is Josefina. I also went to fashion school with them, two geniuses. I'm from Colombia and coming from like a developing country, I was always interested in these like socioeconomic barriers created through fashion, especially luxury fashion. And was always like in the street looking at these like fake Nikes and like fake things. And I was so interested about how there is a market that needs these like luxury access to fashion, but then you can't have it. There's no like economical means for it. And that was basically like the focus of my work for the past year or so, where I was looking at markets in Mexico, I was looking at markets in Colombia and like China, and like seeing how the things that we consume nowadays, probably most of them we don't know where they come from, somewhere in like the Pearl River Delta. And like I was just interested in how knockoffs provide this kind of opening for people who can't access like luxury fashion, but then they say like, you know what, we want it, and then they go steps further than that, and they're like, well, I want this Louis Vuitton Gucci thing, why not? Like Louis Vuitton and Gucci are not gonna collaborate anytime soon, but in these markets that is allowed. So in that, and in the ability of like fomenting knockoff as a reality, the idea of me was to kind of debunk these hierarchies in fashion in a way in which like it is inclusive, it is like democratic, people are taking kind of that inclusivity into their own hands and saying like, I can belong to this. So, I mean, I can talk to you a little bit more about my work afterwards, but it was mostly about changing the definitions of what luxury is from being luxury fashion and into actually democratic, like being inclusive, community-based. So that's basically like the gist of it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Joshua, do you want to
Hi, my name is Joshua.
write into the
Oh,
No, right in there.
oh, all right, that's better. Hi, my name is Joshua. I work with Lara Chimera on AI and fashion. My background is actually, I started with hacktivism when I was pretty young. So I was always into computers and hacking, but I was also raised around the fashion world because of my family. So, I started classes with MIT at the same time and Parsons. So looking at computer science at the same time as fashion is a really unique point of view where you realize that this is an engineering problem first and foremost. This idea of redesigning the way that we design so that our manufacturing makes sense and it creates like good systems of production was really a big passion of mine. Yeah, and so teamed up with Lara and we made Chimera. So that's where we are.
All right, so I'm just going to keep moving because I know we're on a time limit. So I have some questions. Thank you, Joshua. So, and you guys can all choose to answer. You can just like say, I got this one, right? So my first question is really, how should the fashion cycle be rewritten, right? You all know it, like you know it from, so where it is right now in the fashion industry, it's like the fashion industry cycle really focuses on making merchandise and then selling it. And then like, as someone who's been in the fashion industry for a long time, once the merchandise is sold, a traditional fashion company doesn't think about it anymore, right? It's our responsibility, right? So now we have to rethink that cycle to go through from I'm creating it, I'm selling it, and then it's going to either come back to me or it's going to literally go where fashion goes to die, which is landfill, right? So my question, and who wants to take this one, is what are the immediate things that we can do to, obviously if the cycle's smaller, it will be more economical and more environmentally friendly. So Lara, you got that one?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, one of the things that we can do is make less stuff and make better stuff. We talk about consumerism a lot when in the lens of fashion, and it's just that we make so much stuff, and it's kind of a mystery about where it all goes. So it's kind of like if you're at a store and they're having a sale because the new season is coming out, like it's kind of like it's just disappearing to make room for new stuff. And what a lot of people don't realize is that there's tons and tons and tons of clothing that's never worn that just gets sent to landfill, it gets incinerated, like, you know, like it doesn't get used by people, it doesn't even get worn one time. And we think about fashion having, in the way that we know it, of having its roots in sort of the Industrial Revolution, where people were just beginning to think about, like, how can I like put power into a sewing machine, and like how can I set up a factory where we've got, you know, young girls sewing like the same sleeve hundreds of times a day. And at that time, you know, we didn't have the economies of scale that we have now. So we were trying to meet the scale and demand, but now we're not even at the equilibrium. We've passed the equilibrium of supply and demand. So I think we just kind of need to bring those levels back down so that we're making better quality stuff that people actually want to buy, actually want to hold on to, that actually gets worn, not even one time, but many, many times. And I think that's how we can do it.
So I have a question on that. So, and I'm going to direct this to Jeron and also to you, Colin, because you do a lot of content, like video content. What are your thoughts on augmented reality fashion, right? So we live in a world where often you go out and you get dressed up for the gram, right? For the photograph. So what are your thoughts about creating merchandise that isn't even real and is actually just a filter for that purpose?
You're the #1
Hey, look.
animator in the world.
Well, yeah. I'm excited about it. I'm excited of the future of AR and AR fashion. What that looks like I feel like we've only scratched the surface again with like just the face filters. But I think with like sort of just augmenting reality and fashion, I've really been interested in, you know, fashion that sort of disrupts like facial recognition software and fashion that sort of interfaces with surveillance technologies in a subversive way. That's what I'm excited to see. I know it's not really like a face filter or whatever, but or technically augmented reality, but that is an aspect of digital fashion, if you will, that I'm really excited about, and also kind of scared about, because we're entering into a new age of digital politics, and you know, where it's like people can track our face and things of that sort. So fashion that sort of disrupts that is really interesting, and I've seen a lot of interesting fashion choices, if you will, like in Hong Kong, and accessories that scramble these softwares, and you know, I think that's really cool, really exciting, and I think that'll continue to evolve and grow.
What do you think?
I'm not familiar with so many surveillance blending accessories, but I'm down to collaborate on one. But I think, as you were saying, the augmented, it would be cool to drop a collection that was completely augmented reality, where, I mean, now that you got me excited about it, next collection might just be Instagram filter. And that's pretty amazing. And I think what's cool about that, and what we're always talking about now, is just there's so much opportunity to be creative, and there's so many different lanes now. So it's like you no longer have to be these huge companies to pave yourself a lane. And then since they're so obsessed with sales and keeping every store open, they can't focus so much on these kind of weird and different, unique paths. So I think that's what's a beautiful space we're in. So if you want to become the accessory that, as you were saying, fights against surveillance, you can do that and build your own lane there, and then become, and then now we live in the world where Louis Vuitton's going to call you and try to be a part of it. So.
Yeah, I think so. That leads me to this other idea or thought that I had was, you know, that the world is kind of split right now into two generations, right? There's like obviously I'm older than you guys, so there's like my generation and up, people in their like 60s and whatever. And then there is your generation and younger. And at what point do you think that, this generation that's sitting up here on the table, you say like, LVMH is literally doing like, and it's true, they do like an equity purchase, right? They want your brand equity to keep their company modern. But at what point and how can we empower this community that you're in to actually take control of the ideas that you have and use them? And I know that we're sitting in like a EDC, a kind of a government-funded situation here. How can we use the things that we're doing to actually make policies? And what support do we need from, the government to be say like, okay, I'm making these surveillance destructing bracelets, or hey, we're going to only have factories that make one of ones, or we're going to train people to not just use sewing machines, but to actually like sewing machines that are powered by computers, right? So what are or which they are anyway, but more advanced. So I'm going to throw this at you. What does like society and what do we need to do to make these changes instead of just going around and saying like, okay, we all need to be sustainable?
I think like it's
And
not
closer to
only.
the mic.
Oh, sorry. I don't think it's only about like the brand itself and like production itself, but it's more about like being a conscious consumer. Because when you know the brands you are buying from, you know what they're doing, you know how they operate. You have like, your purchase power, which is your biggest tool to communicate to brands in the end of the day. And saying like being a conscious consumer that understands what they're buying and choosing where to buy and where not to buy from gives the brands this like message of, you're probably not doing something, you're not gonna get our money. And that's kind of like the way that I see it, because the consumers are honestly the most powerful source in fashion. And so through consumer power and consumer like messages, brands can start like to modify their ways into something that is more in accordance to what everyone wants, a communal, I guess, like agreement of what needs to happen, and then from that, just like pushing it to law, pushing it to government, and like, yeah.
So technically, we're saying that fashion's role in enforcing change is literally in our wallets.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure. I think like, yeah, a conscious consumer has like the most power in anything. Like if you understand where you're buying from, if you're inquiring, like being actually like worried about the things you're consuming is important. And people like sometimes just block it out. But I feel like if you understand, you can make better choices, which eventually lead to better production and better brands, and giving power to those brands which you do agree with.
So, Joshua, I have a question. So if we were all in this room, if we had used artificial intelligence to make the clothes that we were wearing right now, what would we be wearing? And how would that have happened?
Well, I think the best part of the answer to this is that I have no freaking idea. Like, I have absolutely no idea what every single person in here would choose to be wearing. And I think that's the thing that big companies are missing. That is the missing link between, overproduction, destroying our planet, and individualism, because individualism is just so key to fashion. And I don't know what everybody's wearing. Hopefully it'd be something, I mean, I might hate it, and I'm okay with that. If I use AI to design something for somebody that I think is awful, fine. Like, if they love it, that's,
So the point is that basically through artificial intelligence, everyone is a designer, and it's the ultimate democracy of design.
Yeah, it's about putting that power in the hands of the consumer as a designer, and to say, you are your own brand. Like, let yourself be your own brand, and there's power in that, yeah.
Okay, my last question before I throw it to you guys for questions, because I'm sure, I know that I have a ton of questions for you individually, but I want to throw it to the audience. What do you think the world looks like, fashion looks like in, 50 years? Or, like say we're talking about Y2K20, Y3K. What is that, do you ever think about that?
I think about it. I always think about what the future's looking like. And this is just, my perspective on it, but I feel like it's cool to be sustainable, and like, my generation, younger people, we genuinely fuck with the earth and we want to take care of it and stuff. And so, recycled stuff, and anytime a new sort of biodegradable synthetic material comes on the market, my dick gets hard. So I think there's gonna be a lot of like new either synthesized biodegradable materials that we're gonna start using, and it's just gonna be the norm. It'll be the new cotton or whatever. Or we'll figure out another way like to work with some sort of bacteria. I think bacteria is probably like the new echelon of art, fashion, and technology and sustainability. And I think minimalism is gonna come back in a big way because, I just feel like we're just constantly bombarded with text and images and marketing, and I feel like people are gonna gravitate to more simplicity and things that put our mind at peace a bit more, as opposed to like the maximalistic nature of everything going on right now, everything that happened in the 90s and all the extravagance. I think we'll go into a more zenned out, organic, fashion.
Okay, and I just have one last thing for Colin first, is that the importance of community, and you mentioned that you had sewing machines, right? Singer gave you sewing machines. So what's really interesting to me is that you have like this artisanal, almost sewing machine culture matched with like the technical things that are available to us. And how do you feel that the combination of hand making things and the technology available to us as like designers and the fashion community, is going to translate into the future?
Well, I think what is quite interesting is the younger generation. There was like a gap between who wanted to sew. No one wanted to be a maker 10, 15 years ago, right? And now there's this whole wave of people really wanting to show the craftsmanship, really wanting to learn what we would consider kind of old crafts. And I think that combined with the technology we have creates a lot of interesting creators and makers. And you were talking about the future, and I think the future just has a lot of self-starters, smaller, like instead of 10 huge brands, it's a million little brands in different sectors. Because also, to think of it, it's like in the future, there's going to be robots that are making everything, right? So there's going to be a point where, Andrew Yang wants to give like $1,000 a month to everyone because this industrial revolution ×2 is going to happen. So there's all these workforce is going to be out of jobs. So I think there's going to be more time and more money for us to be making things that are like important to us rather than focused on making money. So I think there's a big space to, yeah. I also think what's cool is like, since there's this horrible environment situation going on, there's so many different ways to think creative. And growing up, I was like, what is my revolution? You know what I mean? You see in the 70s, there's this clear issue to fight against. And I think ours in the next generation is the environment. So I think it's what we're all going to get behind. And I think that's interesting. It's pretty cool. We're looking here. We're very far in Brooklyn. And everyone showed up. And it's funny, like, you were saying it's the consumer power, but it's like everyone here is incredibly interested in sustainability, but how many people here are wearing brands that are completely against sustainability? Like how many H&M do we probably see, or You know what I mean? So I think that's going to start changing drastically. And I think people are going to be willing and wanting to pay, like, let's say a t-shirt's $5, but environmentally friendly t-shirt's $30. People are going to be willing to pay that $30. I think that's where it's moving. And then that's going to change the way everyone works. And so all these big brands are going to need to make it sustainable because that's where the consumer's going. So it's an interesting world.
I think sustainability is technically the new streetwear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is cool. It's like hyped for the right reason.
I agree. All right. Okay.
Bar.
Bomb, baller question, baller answer. Okay, so who has any questions for anybody? Just step up and, I'll go for it.
Hi.
Just introduce yourself first. Just say, hi,
Hello? Hi, my name is Dora. I work in sustainable fashion. I have a two-part question per Julie mentioned augmented reality and AI. I wonder whether an Instagram filter, I think that's a great idea, but whether that would feed into people's sense of insecurity about their body image, that they need an ever-changing look to look polished. The other part is, I wonder, so I know that 3D sampling is already being pioneered by some brands to, in production, that they can create a 3D sample that resemble a real cloth. And if there is a combination of AR and 3D sampling, image posted on Instagram, could that be used to forecast fashion trend so that brands can know consumer demand before even starting production?
I would say yes. I think if you can put your stuff out there and get, immediate response to it, definitely yes. On your 3D design and sampling question, all of the designers who were in our VFILES runway show last season were designed in 3D. So that is like really, really interesting progression. Then in terms of the body conscious thing, all of us up here very, 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 conscious of being democratic and available to everybody and no limits. And obviously, I think the beauty of an AR sample is that it can morph to any body, and I think that takes out a lot of the problems of different size restrictions. Jeron, do you want to jump in on that one, or Colm, or Lara, or any of you guys here can actually talk about this because you are very technical.
Yeah, with the AR thing and the body issues, I feel like that stems a lot from the media and advertising, and I think until we sort of change the way we talk about and advertise beauty standards, I think people's insecurities are gonna be present, and I think that the AR filters and whatnot, they can kind of go both ways. In some ways, they kind of give people more confidence and more comfort in their body, because sometimes I've seen filters that really barely do anything, but they're like, oh my God, I look so beautiful. I'm like, oh, I guess, you know what I'm saying? It's they kind of see the beauty within them a little more. So I think that's cool, but it's also something to hide behind and could push them deeper within themselves. So, who knows where it's really gonna go, but it could go really any way.
I think part of what's coming next in the future of fashion, because we've talked about how we're enabling ourselves to, anybody can be a brand with the internet. Anybody can be a brand. There's so many people in this generation, upcoming generations, that are interested in expressing their creativity through clothing, through Instagram, through things like that. So I actually don't think that trends, as the way that we know them now, I think they're getting less and less important, and in the future they won't even really be important at all. So it used to be that magazines would tell you, you need to wear this season, or you're not cool, you're not pretty, you're not whatever. And now people barely really pay attention to magazines. And I think when we enable more people to, make things that truly resonate with who they are, then, you're not going to be so focused on trends. And when you're doing that, you're also not going to be focused so much on, what a company says a size 2 or a size 0 is.
Yeah, I think just on the trend thing, it's like these huge companies have like 2 years leeway for production. And that's why they care about the trends. But I make something and I'll drop it tomorrow. And so it's funny, I just did a Puma collab, and like I designed it, and it's actually this, which I'm not supposed to be wearing. But they were like, I was like, oh, amazing, like, when's it coming out? They're like, how's August 2021? I was like, what the fuck? Like, no wonder you care about the trend stuff, you know what I mean? Like, I would make this and drop it in a month. So that's where I think this whole thing's gonna change about trends, because there's gonna be so many small little brands that are blowing out these huge production deadlines or timelines. And then also I think, to call on the little brand thing, I think that we're in a generation that everyone wants to be their own brand and their own creative, and I think that's also kind of hurting us from working together and focusing on one project. I've been finding now when I have people come work for Kid Super, a lot of the time they're like, my brand, my brand, my brand, and I'm like, yeah, do you, like, that's amazing, but also, like, I think not everyone has to be the boss or the founder or everything. Like, working together and coming up with projects, I think, is important too. So that's another thing that I'm always aware of in this generation. Yeah. So if anyone here is really good at plastic and clothing, that's what I want to get on next. But if there's a scientist in here, call me.
All right, we've only have like 5 minutes, so
Speed
go.
questions.
Hi. Oh, my goodness. I'm Sarah Caitlin. Speaking on how you said people don't pay attention to magazines, a lot of us are still looking towards the people who attend the Grammys and YouTubers and Instagram models. And a lot of what I enjoy is looking at those designer dresses and saying, wow, those are beautiful. But then another part of me that loves sustainability and fashion thinks, what a waste. These dresses are being worn once, and then who knows what even happens to them after. I know, I don't. You guys might. But how does that make you guys feel to see these people who are influencing the rest of the entire world? Like, it's not just America looking to Mariah Carey. There's thousands of countries. How does that make you feel to see these people not represent fashion in a sustainable way? And is there anyone that you've seen take on any type of sustainability that we could look to?
You can say, well, I'm going to say one thing, and then you guys can all say. I think that the number one thing is that we have to empower, like my job at VFILES is to empower a community like this to make merchandise that's so good that they have to wear it. You know what I mean? So we need to just come up into that cycle a little bit, educate the stylists, and say, hey, call Colm. He's going to make you one of one. Call Josefina. I mean, Rico Nasty wore your stuff, right? Yeah, like call Josefina. She's going to... So really how we have to combat that, I mean, how do you make it feel? It's all just a lack of education or knowledge, because I'm sure that most celebrities would like to be supporting youth, supporting the environment. We just got to get the story out there.
I think it's going to change. I think you'll see the next runways or red carpets are going to be very focused on sustainability. Because, as I was saying, it's trendy and it's hyped for a good reason. So I think the whole world's about to change like that. So I don't know where the stocks are to invest in sustainability, but I would put my money there.
Well, there's also the concept of like, these dresses in like, if you see on a run or a red carpet, a couture gown, it's the idea of it is extremely unsustainable to throw it away. But a couture gown in and of itself is the opposite of the problem that we have in our industry right now. It is a one-off garment that is not being overproduced. They're not making 30,000 of these and hoping 5,000 buy it and the rest going in the ocean. So this is a concept, this concept of couture, if we're able to bring that concept into our production system, actually is one of the greatest ideas of fixing it, like this system over production. So, and if you're looking at celebrities they're used to this kind of treatment, and I'm sure they would love to be making this kind of treatment sustainable and for everybody. It's just about like educating them and getting them to the right people.
Okay, one more question. I'm going to get in trouble.
Thank you so much. This is so good. It's so good to be here, and just look at the beauty of this crowd. You know, just want to point that attention. Like, we are walking advertisement of what's possible. That's really it. If you have anything
Legendary.
to add.
No question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great
That's
ending.
a great way to end.
And
All right, so these guys are going to be hanging around a little bit. Ask them. I mean, I am honestly honored to have sat here with the brain space that's here and asked your questions. Thank you, Julie, for having us very, very much. And enjoy the rest of the afternoon.